Educating kids in custody, school choice. A question we often get asked in our office is, what kind of school will my child be going to after we separate and we go through a divorce? And the options are very varied. So there is public school, there is private school, there's private parochial church school, there's homeschool co-ops, and other ways to educate children that are all recognized in North Carolina. A lot of times the parents agree that the children should be going to one or the other. And it's been my experience that what often happens is if a child is in private school and you go to court to have a custody trial and one side is arguing to take the child out of the private school, they're often arguing to take the child out of the private school because they don't want to pay the increased child support, which factors in the tuition of the private school. It has been my experience over the 20 years of doing these cases that if a child is already in a private school, the court will leave the child in a private school as long as that school is meeting the needs of the child. It is very rare for a court to just take a child out of a private school and send them to a public school just because one side now doesn't want to pay for it, as long as both parties can reasonably afford whatever the private school cost. Now, there is some debate about homeschool. If the child was being homeschooled, the court will often leave the child in homeschool unless there is some evidence that the child's needs are not being met in homeschool. We recently tried a case in Johnston County where the court ordered the children to go back to public school because the mother did not do the homeschooling for almost 9 consecutive months because she had some medical issues. And the court found that the homeschooling was not being done. And so at that point, the child has to go to public school. So it's never a given as to what any court's going to do when you don't agree on what type of school the child goes to. But the court is doing everything in its power, in my experience, not to disrupt the child's life any more than is already being disrupted with the fact that its parents are no longer going to be together. It's going to be living in 2 separate households. And oftentimes the school is the most stable thing that a child has going for it at any given time, which is why COVID has been so bad over the last year or whatever here in North Carolina with kids not going to school, that the court will often just leave the child in the school that it is in, whatever type of school it is, unless it can be shown that that school is just not meeting the needs of the child for whatever reason.